Hello everyone, in this lesson we're going to be looking at biomass transfers, which is part of the B18 chapter and it's lesson 9 of this set of lessons. Your objectives for today are to be able to describe how much biomass is transferred from one trophic level to the next and explain the different ways in which biomass is lost at each trophic level. Your quick task is to try and recall why biodiversity is important. So pause the video, write down your title, date and objectives, complete the quick task and then press play when you're ready to move on. And here are some of the answers you might have found for your quick task. So biodiversity is important because firstly, if one organism becomes extinct, it can affect others in its ecosystem or habitat. So the more biodiversity there is in a particular ecosystem, the more stable that ecosystem is. Secondly, in an area with lower biodiversity of organisms, losing one organism can be devastating. So, for example, if you were to look at something like a panda, which is very solely dependent on bamboo, losing that bamboo can have a really critical impact on the pandas because that's their main food source. Number 3, undiscovered organisms could be useful for food or medicine for humans. And lastly, ethical reasons. You know, we all share this planet, we live on it together, and we shouldn't really be exploiting resources and killing animals and making things go extinct just because it benefits us. We need to think about all the other living organisms on our planet as well. Okay, so for your starter activity, normally you would do this maybe as a think, pair, share and feedback to each other. So at home, what I want you to do is maybe think about this, write some bullet points or talk to someone about it if you're sat watching this with them. Which appliance will run out of energy first? So let's say I put exactly the same batteries, 2 batteries of Duracell batteries into the remote, 2 Duracell batteries into the robot dog toy, and 2 Duracell batteries into the clock. Which will run out of energy first and why? So pause the video, have a think about it or talk to someone about it and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, it should have been fairly obvious and you've all had experience of using various appliances, but the thing that's going to run out of energy first is going to be the robot dog. It's going to be moving, it's going to be, the parts are going to heat up as it moves, it's going to be making noises, and there are lots of different moving parts to it. So a lot of movement means it's going to be using up a lot of the battery energy. So the second thing to run out of energy would be the clock. So the clock is moving, but the hour hand and the minute hand and the second hand, they're quite small, so they're only going to be using a little bit of energy. As you know, inside the wall clock at the back, there'd be this little box with the gears inside. So the only movement occurring is those little gears and the handles. So the batteries will last longer in the clock. The item that would last the longest with those batteries is the remote control. There's no movement involved in using a remote control. When you press the button, it activates a particular circuit or algorithm to make the remote control send an infrared message. So as you know, there's a little infrared bulb here on the remote control to send a message to your TV to tell it what to do. So all you're doing there is activating an electrical circuit, and that's what the electricity released from the chemical energy in the battery is used for. So what's this got to do with our lesson? What's going to use energy and what's not going to use energy? Well, we've got to think about living things as well and how they use energy and how they lose energy. So again, what I want you to do is maybe have a think, write some bullet points or talk to someone about how you think organisms lose energy using the pictures that I've shown you here. So pause the video, have a think about each picture and then we'll talk through the answers. Okay, so let's go around these pictures and see what we're looking at here. So first of all, energy for heat. So mammals and birds make their own heat energy and keep their own bodies warm. Other animals just take on the heat from their surroundings. So for example, a lot of reptiles or lizards and things like that, they live in hot climates because the warm temperatures in the environment is what keeps their bodies warm. Or fish are cold, they stay fairly cold, they live in the sea. But mammals and birds need to stay warm, so we use some of our energy to keep our bodies warm. This image here, we can see the tiger running through the water. So a lot of energy, and this is most of the energy that animals use, is through movement. So whether that's moving to hunt and catch prey, whether it's moving to forage for food, moving around to find a mate, moving around in general, migrating, going to and from a home location to elsewhere, moving is the main way in which organisms, animals, use their energy up. The next image, we've got this cat sitting in its litter tray, and some energy is lost through feces and urine. So when we eat food, not all of it is fully digested. So the fibrous parts of a plant, for example, is what makes it easier to go to the toilet so you don't get constipated. So some of that food that is not fully digested ends up in poop. And urine is one way in which excess proteins are removed. So when we eat too much protein and our body doesn't use it all, that is broken down into urea, which is filtered out by the kidneys, and we excrete that in urine. So feces and urine is one of the ways in which the food energy that we consume is lost. It's not actually all used by us. This image here, we have a mother dog feeding her pups, and another way in which energy is used is reproduction, finding a mate, and for the female organism, growing the little animal inside its uterus if it's a mammal, but for other organisms, producing eggs, laying eggs, and then possibly sitting on and incubating them is how we use up energy. And last of all, as in the picture, you can see that the dog is feeding its pups milk. So the production of milk is one way in which female mammals also use energy. Last of all, plants use energy for movement as well. They move a tiny bit just to change the direction of their leaves to face the sun, but most of the energy used by plants is for chemical processes and respiration inside them. And as I mentioned before, in animals, respiration and releasing energy for movement is a main way in which energy is lost. But in plants, I've put a picture of a dead plant in here because at all stages of all trophic levels, animals die and decomposers take that energy. So another way in which energy is lost is excretion, which we talked about with the cat, but also death and decay. So at every trophic level, energy is lost through death and decay, and that energy goes to the detritivores and to organisms that break down other organisms, and I've completely forgotten that word. It's decomposers. Okay, so what we need to do is pause the video here, use the information earlier in the video, or use pages 302 to 303 in the AQA biology book to write 1 or 2 sentences for each of these 1, 2, 3, 4 points to write down how biomass is lost at each trophic level. So pause the video, write your sentences, and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay, so let's look at biomass transfers and biomass losses in this example of a food chain here. So we've got wheat grains here, which are eaten by chickens, and the chickens are made into cat food, which is eaten by the cat. Okay, so where does this wheat get its energy from? Well, all plants get their energy from the sun, which shines down, and when the wheat is growing in the field, it's not this brown colour, it's slightly paler, and they also have green leaves. So the sun shines down, light energy to the wheat and to all of our planet, and the wheat uses that energy for photosynthesis. Now, of all the energy that the Earth receives, light energy that the Earth receives from the sun, only 1% of that is used as photosynthesis in plants and algae, and we call that the incident energy. So the wheat uses that 1% of energy from the sun and photosynthesizes, as well as all the other plants on Earth. That 1% of energy from the sun, the incident energy, is what enters the food chain. That is where our biomass comes from. Okay, so what happens next? Well, the wheat grows, and as I've mentioned, wheat isn't just as it is in this picture. It's kind of like this. So you've got a stalk and maybe some like very thin leaves, and then right at the top of here you get the little ear of wheat. That's where the grains are. And of course, under the ground, you've got the roots growing. Okay, now that energy that is being used by the plant is being used to produce all the parts of its structure. So its biomass is all of this. The only bit that's being eaten is this part here. The rest of this is going to go to waste. So actually, generally and broadly speaking, what you find is only 10% of the energy at each level is transferred up. So 10% goes to the chickens. Okay, so the chickens eat the grains. Then what happens? Well, they move around. They lay eggs every day, and they make noises. That's movement of their vocal cords. They generate heat to keep themselves warmth. Maybe if some of their feathers are molting and falling out, they need to grow new feathers. So a lot of their energy is used for moving and growing, but and keeping warm and like respiration and so forth. But the cat isn't going to eat the bones. It's not going to eat the beak. It's not going to eat the comb, the red part on the top of its head, or any of these bits. It's not going to eat the feet, and it's not going to eat the eggs. I mean, we could eat the eggs if we wanted to. That's all very good, but essentially the eggs that the chicken produce in terms of this food chain are wasted energy. Okay, so out of all the energy that the chickens consume from the wheat, only 10% is going to go up to the cat. Okay, so the cat is not getting all of this 1% of energy that we started off with. It's actually getting only a fragment of that energy from the sun after you lose 10%, and then another 10% actually gets to the cat. So how would that look in terms of a pyramid of biomass? Well, let's just rub this up for a second. So I can just draw a quick pyramid here. If the energy in the wheat is represented by this block, and this block is 10 centimetres long, what's 10% of 10 centimetres? 1 centimetre. So the block that represents a chicken would be 1 centimetre. What's 10% of 1 centimetre? A millimetre. So that's why pyramids of biomass are always this shape. At each stage you're losing 90% of the energy. And now, just wanted to reiterate again, that 10% is a very broad approximation. It's different at different levels. So for example, it's easier for carnivores to digest meat because there's not as much fibre and not as much cellulose and other bits and pieces. It's actually harder to digest plant material because there's a lot of fibre, a lot of cellulose, etc. So a lot of energy is lost here. But as I said, broadly speaking, we say 10% is passed up at each level, 90% is lost. So what I'd like you to do is complete these keynotes, fill in the gaps, and pause the video as you do it. When you're ready for the answers, press play. And here are your answers. Of all of the light energy that reaches us from the sun, only 1% is used by plants and algae for photosynthesis. This is known as the incident energy. It may not sound like a lot, but it is enough to provide almost all of the biomass life on Earth needs. As you go up the trophic levels, the amount of biomass they contain decreases. Only approximately 10% of the energy contained in each level is passed up, and much is lost through waste movement, maintaining body temperature. Okay, for your next task, I'd like you to check your EduLink and or your school email, because you will have received a worksheet as an attachment either on the EduLink work for this lesson or on the school email that was sent out for this lesson. You need to complete the worksheet. The title of it is Energy Transfers Between Trophic Levels. If you get stuck at any point, try using pages 302 or 303 out of the AQA biology book. And in terms of the worksheet itself, you can print it off if you want to, you can type directly into it if you want to, or if you're not able to print it and you're not able to type into it, you can just read it off the screen and then write your answers in your exercise books. You'll be expected to green pen mark this next week, and we will send the answers out to you at that time. So next week, once you get the answers, use your green pen to mark and correct your own work. Okay, so if you've completed that worksheet, I'd like you to self-assess yourself against today's objectives. Can you describe how much biomass is transferred from one trophic level to the next? And can you explain the different ways in which biomass is lost at each trophic level? Give yourself a confidence rating. If you're super confident, it's a smiley face. If you're not sure, middle face. If you really don't get it, sad face. And as always, please do carry out some further study to make sure that you really understand the work from today's lesson. Check out other YouTube lessons, for example, Free Science Lessons or Primrose Kitten. Check out your GCSE AQA biology textbook on Caboodle, page 302, 303. And there's always the other websites available to you, such as BBC Bitesize, GCSE Pod, and Seneca Learning, or any other websites that you like to use. Well done for your hard work today, and I'll speak to you again on the next lesson.